They're tearing this place down soon. Why are you still holding on, old man? A young city official yanked the toolbox right out of the elderly mechanic's hands. Leo didn't say a word, he simply knelt and began gathering each scattered tool, one at a time. The very next morning, chaos took over the block. Dozens of high-end vehicles, everything from gleaming Bentleys to classic Corvettes, lined up bumper to bumper outside that weathered little garage. Welcome to Uncovered Tales. Here's what really went down. Leo Martin was 72 years old and had spent nearly his entire life in that shop. A second-generation mechanic, he'd kept the garage running for 43 years straight. The place wasn't flashy, it sat on a quiet corner with a tin roof that had seen better days, but for decades, it had been the heart of the town's trust in honest work. Inside, the walls told stories, faded photos of smiling customers beside freshly fixed cars, thank-you notes written in shaky pens, and tools that had been passed down from Leo's father, who first opened the doors back in 1963. The concrete floor, stained dark with oil, bore the footprint of countless repairs, each stain a quiet tribute to a problem solved, a family helped, a journey continued. One quiet Tuesday, while swapping spark plugs on Mrs. Jenkins's aging 1989 Buick, a car he'd cared for since it was new, Leo was handed a letter. It was an official notice. The city had voted to rezone the area. His block was being earmarked for a trendy commercial district filled with boutique shops and high-end eateries. He had exactly 7 days to pack up and leave. No help. No offers to relocate. According to the documents, the garage no longer met the city's structural standards. And just like that, after more than 4 decades of service, Leo was being dismissed, his life's work reduced to a single sheet of paper. The very next day, a sharply dressed young man in a tailored suit showed up. Couldn't have been more than 30. He stood at the entrance, tablet in hand, tapping impatiently as Leo tightened a stubborn bolt beneath a hood. "Mr. Martin, I need your signature to confirm receipt of the notice," he said flatly, without so much as a greeting. Leo stood, wiped his greasy hands on a nearby rag, and replied. "Is there someone I can talk to about getting an extension? Some parts one order take weeks to arrive." The official cut him off, his tone dismissive and cold. "This place is done," he said, glancing around with thinly veiled contempt. "How much longer do you really think you can keep up? Today's cars run on software, not, whatever this is." He motioned vaguely at the workbench Leo had so carefully kept in order. When Leo paused, reluctant to sign, the official slammed his palm against the counter, sending a tray of neatly arranged tools crashing to the ground. Wrenches, sockets, and screwdrivers, some of them inherited from Leo's father, clattered loudly against the concrete. Leo slowly knelt, wincing as his stiff knees protested the movement, and began retrieving the tools one by one. His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted a socket wrench, the very one his father had given him on his 16th birthday. Outside, a few passers-by glanced through the open door but quickly turned away, pretending not to notice. That night, long after the last customer had left and the town had gone quiet, Leo remained in his garage. He sat hunched on his old wooden stool, one hand resting gently on the toolbox his father once called his most prized possession. He stared across the shop, not seeing the dusty shelves or scattered bolts, but remembering the thousands of cars that had come in battered and rolled out whole again. By the next morning, word had made its way around Millfield. Most folks didn't make a fuss. "Things change," they said. "That's just how progress works." At the cafe across the street, locals sipped their coffee and speculated about the new businesses moving in. "It's good for real estate," one agent chimed in. That garage was starting to look pretty run down anyway. No one seemed to recall how Leo had stayed open through the blizzard of '96, braving the cold to chain tires and jumpstart dead batteries. Or how he'd kept his rates low for retirees, even when suppliers raised their prices year after year. Kevin Rhodes, who had launched a sleek, high-tech auto shop along the highway just last year, dropped by with a forced expression of sympathy. "Everything's computerized now, Leo," he said, lounging casually against the doorway in his spotless uniform. You're still clinging to the past. Honestly, there aren't many old cars left to fix anyway. Leo didn't reply. He just kept packing, wrapping each tool in cloth with quiet care. He boxed up spark plugs, oil filters, socket sets, as if he were saying goodbye to old friends he wasn't sure he'd ever see again. That afternoon, an old face appeared at the entrance. Tommy Mitchell, a friend from high school, someone Leo hadn't seen in years, stepped inside. Thought I'd ask if you'd sell me the shop sign, Tommy said, a little sheepish. Might hang it in the den, for old time's sake. Leo gave a silent nod, unable to force a word past the lump rising in his throat. As the sun began to sink behind the rooftops, casting long amber shadows across the dusty floor, Leo opened an old drawer in his desk. Inside, he found a pile of Polaroids, photos of smiling kids who had grown up and later brought their own children to him for their first oil changes. Families whose vehicles he'd serviced through weddings, job losses, graduations, and funerals. He picked up a small notepad and, with his careful, slanting handwriting, scribbled a simple message. Thank you. I've lived a life without regrets. He taped the note to the inside of the window, small and understated, where only someone paying close attention would notice. That night, up in the modest apartment above the garage, the only place he'd called home since his wife passed away, Leo sat quietly on the edge of his bed. His fingers traced the faded initials carved into the lid of his father's old toolbox. I just hope, he whispered into the stillness, someone out there remembers that these hands once helped get them back on the road. The only response was the faint hum of passing traffic and the occasional honk echoing through the streets. People were heading home, their minds elsewhere, unaware, or maybe just indifferent, to the old mechanic quietly fading into history. But I can't just stand by anymore. How can a man who gave over 40 years of his life to serve his community lose everything, just because of one cold, impersonal document? If this hits you as deeply unfair as it does me, don't scroll past. Say something. Comment. Show respect. The next morning, Leo arrived at the garage just after sunrise, determined to finish clearing out what remained of his life's work. The early light spilled across the cracked pavement, casting a soft golden hue on the shop that had been his second home for over 4 decades. As he began rolling up the door for the final time, a low, familiar growl of an engine broke the stillness. Then came another. And another. He turned, and couldn't believe what he was seeing. A pristine 1967 Corvette Stingray rolled to a stop, its cherry-red finish glowing in the morning sun. Just behind it came a deep blue Mustang GT, followed by a sleek Bentley Continental, and then a classic Jaguar E-Type. One by one, vintage and luxury vehicles crowded the narrow street, their engines humming in perfect harmony like a mechanical choir. Startled neighbors stepped outside in their pajamas, phones raised high to capture the surreal moment. Cars stopped. Foot traffic froze. It was like a spontaneous car show had materialized out of thin air. The door of the Corvette opened, and out stepped Alex Rivera, now 42 and the CEO of a major tech firm in Boston. But Leo remembered him instantly. The shy teenager who'd once limped in with a beat-up Honda, desperate to make it to a job interview. Alex walked up to Leo, and then, unexpectedly, he dropped to one knee. In his hand was a worn photograph, a younger Alex and Leo, standing beside that old Honda, 24 years ago. You probably don't even realize what you did for me, Leo, Alex said, his voice steady but emotional as it echoed through the hushed crowd. My car died right before my first interview. You fixed it, refused to take any money. You told me to come back when I got my first paycheck. That job changed the course of my life. Then, one by one, more drivers emerged, each carrying their own piece of Leo's legacy. Nina Alvarez, now a trauma surgeon, stepped forward holding a framed letter. You patched my tire for free the night before my med school entrance exam. I wouldn't have made it on time without you. And because of that, because of you, I've saved lives. Darius Moore, now a respected judge, adjusted his tie and looked Leo square in the eye. "We're not here to repay a debt, Leo. We're here to stand for what this place means, to make sure this neighborhood doesn't forget who held it together." As the crowd grew, townspeople gathered from every direction, many of them streaming live on their phones. Social media exploded. The hashtag Leo's Garage trended locally and then picked up steam across the region. The young city official, the same one who had once knocked over Leo's tray of tools, arrived holding his clipboard. He froze just steps from the crowd, dumbfounded and silent as the scene unfolded before him. Finally, a distinguished man with silver hair stepped from a black Mercedes. It was Edward Blake, now the director of the Department of Transportation. But Leo remembered the college kid who'd once come by for help changing his own oil, pockets empty, dreams full. "Leo Martin," he said formally, his voice carrying the weight of something long overdue, "it's an honor to present you with this certificate of recognition for decades of service." He handed Leo a crisp, embossed document bearing the city seal. "You are officially recognized as the guardian of craftsman's ethics in this community." Then, leaning in with a softer tone, he added, "And, let's just say there may be a rezoning amendment up for discussion at tomorrow's emergency council meeting." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, many wiping away tears as Leo stood motionless, his eyes welling with emotion, his reflection mirrored in the polished chrome around him. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need to. Instead, Leo sat quietly on the steps of his old shop and picked up one last wrench, gently wiping it clean with the same reverence he'd always shown his tools. Just then, a small boy pushed through the crowd, cradling a toy car with a broken wheel. "Excuse me, sir, can you fix this?" he asked softly, eyes full of hope. Leo smiled and gave a slow, steady nod. "If you believe I can, then I still can." In the weeks that followed, the entire town seemed to come alive with purpose. The community stood behind Leo, and while the garage would eventually close, it would do so on his terms, not the city's. A bronze plaque was placed on the corner, where the old tin roof had once cast shade over countless memories. Leo's Garage, no longer open, but never forgotten. The city council established a yearly scholarship in Leo's name for students pursuing trades and vocational training. Local schools began hosting guest speakers, carpenters, mechanics, welders, reminding young people of the honor in working with your hands. And maybe most meaningfully of all, people started paying more attention to the small businesses in town. The quiet tailor, the dusty old shoe shop, the bakery run by the same family for 3 generations. They began to wonder, what stories are hidden behind these doors? Some folks don't ask for applause. They live by their values, quietly, every day. They might not win the battle for land, but they'll always hold space in the hearts of those they helped. You might forget this story by next week. But if no one tells it again, it's like it never happened. Subscribe to Uncovered Tales, where memory, justice, and everyday heroes live on.